Hey, y'all. Welcome to Cross Politics Live. It's good to be with you. Our show will be beginning in the next couple of minutes, but before we begin, I want to tell you a little story.
Some always trust in chariots, and others trust in horses, but we recall the Lord.
In March 2020, my mayor and our city council, probably like yours or similar, shut down our downtown due to COVID. And this has happened before there was one case of COVID in our town. They shut down downtown. I remember them shutting down my friends' businesses and restaurants, and at the point of a gun with the threat of the cops. They had cops patrolling downtown to make sure all the restaurants were complying. It was just a very ridiculous moment in our city's history. Well, immediately we began pushback. I remember I led an open up business rally in April, pushing back against the city council. I had people from all over North Idaho drive down to attend the open up business rally. And so I wound up kind of in this weird fight that I never thought we would have been. This coronavirus, this COVID insanity battle with our town, and literally for the survival of my friends and their businesses. Well, the shutdown included this health emergency order that required you, if you were outside, you had to wear a mask where you could not stand 6 feet apart. My church, the way we protest is we would go outside in downtown, sing psalms, and not stand 6 feet apart, not wear a mask. And we did this for a series of months. Black Lives Matter came through in June. Black Lives Matter came through in July, and they did their, it was a peaceful protest. They didn't, it never got violent, but they did their protests, and some of them wouldn't wear a mask and stand 6 feet apart. And so we kind of just challenged that there through our psalm sings and our not standing 6 feet apart and not wearing a mask. Every 30 days, our city council would meet and extend that health emergency order. And then in September 21st, it happened, and they extended it through January. So this time it was a months extension, several months extension. And so the reason why I'm talking about this now is because September 23rd, 4 years ago in 2020, is the anniversary of the psalm sing where I got arrested. We do the psalm sings right after work, so people could get off work at 5 o'clock and go downtown and do the psalm sings. And this time my pastors decided, hey, let's do the psalm sing at City Hall parking lot. And so we did that. So about 5 o'clock, I remember pulling up or walking, because my office is close to the parking lot. I remember walking into the parking lot, seeing about 6 to 7 cops up along City Hall parking lot, and they spray painted these 6-foot circles all over the parking lot, or these circles that are 6 feet apart all over the parking lot, so they could objectively frame us and arrest us. So they put all this forethought into framing us for an arrest. The cops had told my pastor, hey, we're going to cite people if they aren't standing 6 feet apart or wearing a mask. And so Pastor Doug turned around and relayed that to the audience. The cops were sitting City Hall building. As soon as we started singing, the cops walked up to me and my mom. They asked my mom, are you with this man? And my mom said, this is my son. After they interrogated my mom, they came to me, and I saw that they let my mom go, or because me and my mom were standing next to each other and we were family. It was all cool. And so I put my arm around my buddy Tyler, and I said, this is my friend Tyler. And the cops proceeded to ask for my driver's license. And I said, I don't need to give that to you. I'm exercising my First Amendment rights. And your oath that you swore, you should actually be standing next to me fighting this emergency order, because you swore an oath to defend my constitutional rights against enemies, foreign and domestic. So he asked me for my driver's license, I think like a fourth time, and then said, okay, I'm going to arrest you. This is still probably the most eerie moment for me, was they had to take my hymn book out of my hands to handcuff me. And as they handcuffed me, they walked me to the patrol car. And the funny thing about the patrol car was they didn't know what cop had the keys for that particular car that was driven. And so I had to wait outside for like 5 minutes of the patrol car. My pastor came over and was rebuking the officer. My brother came over and was rebuking the officer. It's all on tape. You can see it as a very good moment. Watching my church have my back in the truth that we were fighting for. And so anyways, they arrested me. They took me off to jail. I was in jail for about 3 hours. So that happened September 23rd, literally 4 years ago this month. So that's the story. I got in a big fight. I'll just summarize it here. I got in a fight. I won my criminal complaint against my city, and then I got in a 3-year lawsuit against my city because they violated my First Amendment rights and my Fourth Amendment rights. And Thomas More Society backed me, and we won, which was a glorious victory. I want to end here before our show starts and talk about why it's important to remember events like this. Politicians thrive off our short memories. They want us to have short memories. They want us to forget, about Bill Clinton's, sexual acts in the Oval Office. They want us to forget about 2020. They want us to forget about one of the horrible laws they passed, like No Child Left Behind. They want us to forget the past, and they thrive off our short memories. Kamala Harris just 2 months ago was rated the most liberal member in the senator's office, in the Congressional Senate. The most liberal. They scrubbed the website that ranked her that as soon as she became the presidential nominee, or was forced into being the presidential nominee. And so they want you to forget that Kamala was the most liberal, ranked the most liberal senator. And now she's months before her election in November, she's acting like she's this conservative gun-toting queen. And they're all liars. And so for us, we have to remember what happened in the past, because if they're all lying to you, you got to be able to kind of keep understand the narrative in which direction they're going and what is true, even in the current moment. So I know Kamala Harris is a liar because I know she governed so leftist in the past that, even as she tries to act like a gun-toting queen now, which she's said multiple times that she owns guns, trying to play that role, we need to understand the past to be able to obviously correct the future. So the other thing that's going on here is that the COVID tyranny, which every politician, conservative or Democrat, that didn't stand up for you wants you to forget.
I don't really like working.
I only work remotely.
I'm gonna need 8 weeks of paid vacation, maybe 12.
I take a lot of breaks. I feel more mentally healthy.
I'm gonna need a priority parking space.
Do you have non-dairy options in your coffee bar? Do you have soy? Do you have a decaf, half-calf kind of thing? Interviews are so boring.
How's your game?
Do I need to call my dad? You work for him,
You guys are so intense. Do you always work this hard?
You don't run a daycare, you run a business. That's why you need redballoon.work.
I think you need me more than I need you.
Well, welcome everyone to Water Break. The Water Girl Annie Wrench and the Water Boy Gabriel. Good to be with you guys. We are about a month away from our conference in Fort Worth. If you've ever planned a conference, I've used this analogy probably way more than anybody would like to hear from me, but it's like having a baby. And that baby's coming at the end of October, no matter where you like it or not. And if the baby comes out ugly, it's just an ugly baby. It is what it is.
You'd think we'd have learned how to not have such an ugly baby by now.
Yeah, after this is like our 5th or 6th national conference.
Every time there's something.
So a lot of work this last month to kind of bring everything for landing. If you want to actually booth at our conference, you can go to prodigalamerica.com. If you want to attend, of course, go there too. And there's a bunch of other things happening. Like we have a pre-business conference, really cool, from Thursday from 1 to 5. The conference kicks off Thursday evening. We have a church leadership luncheon on Friday, a business luncheon on Saturday. So just a bunch of various events that are happening at the conference. So make sure you kind of find out about all that. Go to prodigalamerica.com and would love to see you there. If you guys want to be in a conversation with us, please email us at RenchMedia. RenchMedia, that's RENCH media @gmail.com. We love getting your questions. We actually just got some questions today before the show started. I don't know if you saw those. So that's a great way to be in conversation with us. And of course, follow my wife on Instagram, me on Twitter, and Annie's website is AnnieWrench.com. And I hope you enjoy the show. So today we're going to talk about Senator Ron Johnson. Over the last couple of years has been I think, made a lot of fantastic plays and bringing things to light, bringing the Twitter files to light. That was a lot of Senator Ron Johnson. And just recently, he had this health and nutrition roundtable that he held in Washington, D.C. And he invited Callie and Casey Means, and he invited a number of other
a bunch of people.
RFK, Jordan Peterson's daughter,
Michaela Peterson, Max Lugavere.
Yeah,
a lot of people.
And so there's a lot. I think a lot of good that Ron Johnson's trying to do there, and I think kind of bringing the way I analyze it. I think politics have in our political class and laws and regulations has done more damage to our food industry than maybe even big food. That's a big statement, but that's where I would put, and I would put big food as being responsible, not pushing back on the government for the regulations. And then I would say, thirdly in all this, like it's the family's job to bring in food into the house. Yeah. It's the family's job. It's just, very basic.
We're responsible. For our nutrition and our health, not the government.
Yeah. And so but I think we've, and part of it, this is be my own experience too, where part of it is I just have put too much trust in the government in areas where I should have never put trust in the government in.
Yeah.
You should.
It's so gross.
Yeah. And we
disappointing.
You shouldn't, the government, God gave government very strict and limited authority. And so when the government starts getting outside of its strict and limited authority that God gave them, like getting involved in food or
anything,
they
mess up everything.
Giving you a license to be a welder or a plumber or something, when the government has no authority over these areas. And so when someone who doesn't have authority over an area gets involved in that area, it's no wonder things go bad.
Yeah.
It's no wonder things start to collapse.
Yes.
And everything. So I think we need to kind of rethink just as families. I think a lot of work can be done just in the family, just kind of rethinking how mom and dad lead the kids, how mom and dad think about who they trust in this world. Don't trust people who are getting involved in areas they should not get involved in. That's just basic principle.
Yeah. Or by extension, trained by the government. I mean, like the
government shouldn't be involved in education.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Like, who are you getting your information from? And question everything. And so it goes really deep.
Yeah. So I think, I'm grateful for Senator Ron Johnson trying to bring, I think, some things to light. We're going to show you a bunch of video clips, but one of the, I think, underlying assumptions that is going on at this roundtable is like, well, the government broke it. The government needs to fix it. And I'm just saying the government broke it. The government needs to get out of it, kind of thing. And some various speakers have different.
They do different takes, and we can talk about it as we go through. But because there's a whole issue of like all the problems, which these clips are going to highlight. But then it's like, okay, but what's the solution? But hopefully we can talk through that. We can get to some takeaways at the end. Just
give me you listened to the whole roundtable. Give me your quick take on kind of on the big picture of what you thought.
It was good. It was some of it was stuff we've heard before, so if you listen to Casey and Callie in their big interview on Tucker, we actually clipped that one too. And several shows ago, walked through that one. So there was a lot of repeat information. Both Casey and Callie were there. RFK got involved, which was great. I mean, he spit out a lot of stats, which I think we have. I think maybe that's where we're starting with our clips. And they're good stats, but they were it was basically good energy stats. So that's Callie and Casey's book that they've been kind of, I don't know, promoting recently. It's a good book. I recommend it, but it's basically, he was just kind of regurgitating those stats. And then they got like some bloggers. They got Max Lugavere in there, who's more of he has a very popular podcast, which I like. I listen to. He's more of just a curious journalist.
Yeah.
Some food advocate type people. And then there's a lot of people kind of telling their N of one story, like how food healed them when pharmaceutical drugs couldn't. And so there's nothing wrong with any of that. I thought it was good. I don't think all of you need to go listen to all 3.5 hours. I think that's what it was, 3.5 hours. But I think the issues that they were talking about are very important. And they are at one way or another, they are at the center of why Americans' health right now is worse than it has ever been. Yeah. So I think I'm excited to go through some of these clips that we thought were worth highlighting and just kind of talk about it, because things are really bad. Yeah. And I think we're starting with RFK was the first speaker. And even though he can be hard to hear and listen to, he spit out a bunch of really kind of horrifying stats. And I think we're going to start with that. And that kind of sets the scene just in terms of how poor Americans' health is and how this is such a recent problem. Like it really, 100 years ago, even you could say 50 years ago, we looked so different. So, so maybe we start with that and we just kind of let the conversation.
I want to add one more thought before we start with RFK, but it's always important, the knee-jerk reaction when you start seeing some real physical problems in our, for this case, the show we're talking about today's food and health and all that stuff.
Right.
The knee-jerk reaction is to think that this is just a material problem, but everything is always driven by spiritual.
Yeah.
Like the spiritual problems is what drives the material problems. The sin problem is what drives the outward manifestation of that problem. And so we don't want to, while I think there's some real, getting the government out of food would be great. I think that would solve a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But over and over in scriptures, you find if a people reject God, stuff starts happening to the food. Famines, the food doesn't grow, whatever, the food becomes cursed. Gluttony becomes a major sin in society. I mean,
food becomes cursed. It kind of feels like that.
It feels a little bit like
this
it,
food is cursed.
So I don't
eat it.
Yeah.
That's a valid point. Something to think about.
Yeah. So I don't ever want to just come in to a landing of like, oh, we just need to rearrange the furniture in the room. Although I think that would do a lot of good.
Yeah.
But it's being driven by, and I would say our immigration. You can have a healthy immigration society, healthy immigration in your society, or that immigration could also be a curse. And scripture is very clear about that too. Like immigration, foreigners invading a land can be a curse, as you find it in scripture. So I think, you always want to have in the back of your mind, okay, God, what are you trying to teach us through this problem? What do you need to expose in my life? What you need to expose in our church life? What you need to expose in our society?
Our nations.
Our nation, bring our sin into the light, because that'll help us, I think, see the food thing a lot clearer.
Yeah.
And so, keep that in the back of your mind. So this video is RFK at the summit at the round table that Ron Johnson.
I think it was around. They called it a round table. Round table.
Kind of giving us some stats about the condition and health of our country. Go ahead.
We have the highest chronic disease rate on earth, and according to the CDC, the average American who died from COVID had, on average, 3.8 chronic diseases. So these were people who had immune system collapse, who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was 1%. When my uncle was president, about 1% of the children in this country had chronic disease. Today, that number may be as high as 60%. In America, 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese, including 50% of our children. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. There were case reports written about them. Obesity was virtually unknown. Today, almost 50% of teens in the United States are overweight or obese. In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3%. Half of Americans have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. And when I was 10 years old and my uncle was president, a typical pediatrician would see one case of type 2 juvenile diabetes during his 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 children who walk through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic.
It's amazing to hear those stats. And of course, again, I always want to check the stats and make sure I even trust the stats that RFK's given us. But
I think they're right on the money.
You can also visually see some problems, obesity and stuff like that in our society.
It's good to check on, but these are Casey and Callie's stats. He's just kind of repeating them, and they came from their very, very thoroughly researched book. So I think they're horrifying stats. Honestly, the 74% of Americans now are overweight or obese, and 50% of our children. Mm-hmm. That's scary. Mm-hmm. And that that never used to be the case. Never used to be the case.
It's also, we pointed this out. I don't know how many times we pointed this out during COVID, where we said multiple times, everyone who's dying from COVID had 3.8 Earlier, it was, I think at one point it was like 3.2 or something, but now it's 3.8.
3.8 is what he said.
Comorbidity,
right.
Diseases,
Chronic
or
diseases.
chronic health contributing factors
Right.
to why they died from, with or from COVID, which is a conversation we're still not allowed to have.
Right. Can't talk about that.
Yeah, I can't talk about that. And it's amazing to me that we made all the COVID lockdowns or on little kids. I remember I got in big trouble because one of our local city councilwomen shared on Facebook that the public school kindergarten kids had did a tour through the new police station, and all the kids, all the kindergartners, they might have been first grade, whatever, were wearing masks, and the cops had their no mask on when they took the picture of like, oh, look at us doing a tour to the police station. I remember saying, oh, this is wicked. You're making you're making these kids wear masks while these cops aren't wearing masks. Like what you're being hypocritical or whatever you're doing here. You're communicating, kids, you have to obey. You have to wear masks. You have to mindlessly obey us while we don't have to wear masks and everything. So I got in big trouble on that, but
good times.
That's not part of this.
Good times.
Not part of this conversation.
Different topic for a different day.
But the point is like, I think if those stats are true, and I believe a lot of them are, that there's a material difference between our previous generation or previous generations in the health versus now. I remember it might have been at this round table where one of the gals pointed out that if you remove I forget if you take out like a section of the previous generation that were dying, I think from like related diseases or something that kind of contributed to the previous generation dying early. If you kind of took out that,
if you factored in for that,
took the control out or something, Americans are actually dying earlier than the previous generation.
I remember her making that point also.
I can't remember.
And our life expectancy now is actually going down. Because thanks to antibiotics and all the things that we've been able to invent and develop in order to keep bodies alive. I mean, it's a separate question whether they're thriving. I think a lot of Americans are not thriving in their old age, but
that's right.
As they get older, but we figured out for so long how to keep us alive, but things have gotten so bad that it's actually starting to go back down, which is crazy considering our technology and how advanced we are right now.
Right. Well, then you add into all the additional medications, like we're the most medicated society in the history of the world.
Yeah, and we're spending the most money.
Yeah.
Currently spending more money on healthcare yearly than any other nation and more than we ever have. And I think it was upwards of 4 million. I can't remember. Right. It was a huge number. Yet we are sicker, fatter, more depressed, and more infertile than ever.
So let's skip the next video, Carter, and let's go to the 5 toxic foods versus abroad. So what's interesting about this is apparently big cereal, big food, they'll make products for Americans, the same cereal for Americans, and they'll take that same, ingredients, that same box of cereal like Kellogg's Fruit Loops, and they'll change the ingredients for another country based on their regulations.
Yeah. So they're putting the cheaper or the more addictive or the brighter colored stuff in ours because it's allowed here. Somehow they get away with it. I'm not quite sure how it works, but when they ship it to
UK
or whatever, they have to, or Canada. And this is illustrating that.
Yep.
Citizens, harmful ingredients that are banned or heavily regulated in other countries. Even worse, American food companies are selling the same exact products overseas without these chemicals, but choose to continue serving us the most toxic version here. This is McDonald's French fries. I would like to argue that probably nobody in this room has not had a McDonald's French fries, by the way. Nobody raised their hand during the staff meeting earlier today. In the US, there's 11 ingredients. In the UK, there's 3, and salt is optional. An ingredient called dimethylpolysiloxane is an ingredient preserved with formaldehyde, a neurotoxin, in the US version. This is used as a foaming agent so they don't have to replace the oil that often, making McDonald's more money here in the United States. But they don't do that across the pond. This is Skittles. Notice the long list of ingredient differences. 10 artificial dyes in the US version and titanium dioxide. This ingredient is banned in Europe because it can cause DNA damage. Artificial dyes are made from petroleum, and products containing these dyes require a warning label in Europe that states it may cause adverse effects on activity and detention in children. And they have been linked to cancer and disruptions in the immune system. This on the screen back here is Gatorade. In the US, they use red 40 and caramel color. In Germany, they don't. They use carrot and sweet potatoes to color their Gatorade. This is Doritos. The US version has three different artificial dyes and MSG. The UK version does not. They launched a new version of Trix just recently in Australia. It has no dyes. They even advertise that when the US version still does.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's
Play the next clip here real quick too, Carter.
Artificial food dyes, they have shown all over the world that they can use colorants that come from fruit.
This is the Canadian version.
This is the brightness of the Canadian version, just for visibility. And this is the brightness of artificial food dyes. So, of course, Kellogg and other food companies will argue children prefer this over this, just as they would prefer cocaine over sugar. That doesn't make it okay.
But I think
make it okay.
I just thought visually that was pretty.
Yeah, no, they're smart.
pretty
They know what they're
interesting
doing
example. Yeah,
with the, you know, and it's just, oh my gosh, there's just so many things here, you know, like, should the government be regulating this stuff? Should it not? Is that their place?
It's not their place.
It's not their place.
No.
But at the same time, it should be illegal to poison someone. Can this fall under that category of like long term? This will actually kill you. Like, you know, at what? I'm not sure what category to put it in.
Yeah. Well, if you can prove the damages, then 100%. You know.
Yeah.
So the government's job is to bring justice and sort out differences and sort out, you know, disagreements and where people have been wronged. That's the government's job.
Right.
They hold the justice, they hold the sword, Romans 13. And so it's not the government's job to tell Big Cereal how to make their food. Yeah. But the problem is here, and I'd love to get like an expert who really gets in, can dig into details and make all the connections here.
Yeah, me too.
The problem here is big government has been involved in food for 80 years. I mean, I know in the 1930s, in the Great Depression, at one point the government was paying farmers to knock down crops, and at another point the government was paying farmers to produce certain crops.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so the government for the longest time had been involved in food, and then regulating food, and then regulating cigarettes, and all these regulations. And so, I mean, now untangling that beast. I mean, the government, you know, crop productions cost a lot now because, I mean, you know, your gasoline, your diesel gas costs a lot now.
There's so much and so many different industries involved.
Yep, and all the industry and the combines that you buy, well, those are regulated. All the parts are regulated. All the inspections are regulated. You know, it's like everything's connected. And so it's such a complicated process to unwind. But it's actually my belief that the government would get out, then some of the tricks and incentives that are driving big food to make some of the decisions that they're making, or like about dyes and stuff like that, it would all change.
It would collapse a little bit.
Even look at it this way: the reason why we can't go sue Big Cereal right now because they put dyes in cereal, and let's say gave my kid allergies or gave my kid whatever. We can't, because the government has allowed that. The government says, no, this is legitimate food making process. You can keep that in your formula.
Like these ingredients are on the okay list.
They've been on the sanction list. Well, this comes up later.
Yeah, it comes up later. Yeah, I see. Exactly. Yeah. So you can't sue because of that.
Right.
And really what we're doing here is just a huge case of correlation. Like this is what all of our, you know, processed food looks like. Here's all the things that seem toxic to human health. And then here's the trend of our health going downhill. But like actually like directly linking is tough. And I think that's one of the reasons that the big food companies have gotten away with this is that you can't, I mean, it's the same with like vaccine injury.
Yeah.
Same kind of problem, right? Where it's like, well, they all got this and then this happened, but they're like, you can't prove it. You know what I mean? So it's really frustrating, but I will say this, and we'll probably talk about this more when we get to takeaways, but you know what? We'll take away every single one of these issues if you just don't buy either of those cereals. Just don't eat them.
Yeah.
And that takes away any guesswork and takes away the whole problem. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
Okay.
Okay.
Now let's move on to American loose guidelines.
America has much looser regulatory approach to approving new ingredients and chemicals than comparable developed countries. Europe, for example, uses a guilty until proven innocent standard for the approval of new chemicals, which mandates that if an ingredient might pose a potential health risk, it should be restricted or banned for up to 10 years until it is proven safe. In complete contrast, our FDA uses an innocent until proven guilty approach for new chemicals or ingredients that's known as GRAS, or generally recognized as safe. This recklessly allows new chemicals into our food system until they are proven harmful. Shockingly, U.S. food companies can use their own independent experts to bring forth a new chemical without the approval of the FDA. It is a travesty that the majority of Americans don't even know they are constantly exposed to thousands of untested ingredients that are actually banned or regulated in other countries. To put it bluntly, for the last 50 years, we have been running the largest uncontrolled science experiment ever done on humanity without their consent. Why should America, the greatest country on earth, be the last developed nation to protect its people?
You know, the reason why we are in a science experiment is because we've let the government have all this power and authority
In the first place.
in the first place.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really, and you know, like he's referencing the FDA, but we find out later from Callie at some point in here that 75% of FDA funding comes from pharma. So why would FDA want to, you know, blow the whistle on any kind of ingredient that might be toxic to people's long-term health? You know,
That's
so
right.
there's so many layers of problems and so many spots, you know, on the pyramid where there's so much perverse incentive. And so why would you trust any of this, you know? And I mean, I get his point. Like, okay, in Europe, for example, it's a guilty until proven innocent, which I would think for food, if you're bringing in some new synthetic chemical, that's probably wise to just be like, well, we're not going to assume it's good for us. We need to do some long-term studies and assume it's not, you know, safe for consumption unless we can really, really, really figure out that it's okay.
Yeah.
I agree. But is it the government's job to enforce it either way? You know, I'm not sure. I mean, then again, if you categorize
what does
it
God
as
give
poison,
the government authority as?
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I know. Yeah.
Their job is, if there's a problem, then they get involved. They don't have this proactive job of regulation. They have a reactive. The government should be reactive to justice and not have some sort of proactive, like, you know, rails that you walk down the path, you know, for. I think, you know, and I would say this is where I get a little nervous because he points out Europe has this kind of guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, it's flipped
kind of thing. It should be
assume it's
it
bad.
should
until
always
it's
be
proven.
innocent till proven guilty. With your life, with everything.
Well, I don't know. For humans, yeah, like you assume they're innocent until they're proven guilty. That's just. But would you take that approach with like weird plants in the forest if you were hungry? Would you just be like, you know what I mean? Like,
no, but I'm
for
talking
human
about
consumption. I don't know if that is
again,
the right way to go.
That's big food's job. That's the husband and wife's job. That's not the government's job. The government, you know, if I want to put, you know, some sort of preservative in my bread and sell it, and then it ends up killing someone, that's my responsibility. The government should come in and put me to death or whatever.
They shouldn't be around the backside monitoring it. Yeah.
They shouldn't be determining who's guilty and who's not, what food items guilty, what chemicals guilty or not. That's the family's job. That's, you know, the food's job. They're the ones who should be responsible for all this. And if something goes wrong, you have an entity that's responsible to pay for it.
Yeah.
The current situation is if the government says it's okay and it goes wrong, you can't sue. Because the government gave its blessing.
Yeah.
So it actually creates far more damage, even though we think, oh, that sounds prudent at the on the front side of it.
Yeah, no.
But on the backside, it's actually way more wicked and way more evil.
And I mean, you guys, just by the way, this is why I encourage everybody, and specifically the people that I work with, is just like, if there is a long ingredient list on that package or box, just stay away from it. Okay, this is the kind of stuff that's going down. I mean, like, this is the kind of stuff that's in there, and
pasta
like,
should be pasta.
Like, well, just stay away from it. This is why it is, for, you know, just one of 10 billion reasons why eating mostly real whole food is the way to go. because of what we've done to our food and how little you can do about it and how much like non-disclosure of, I mean, most Americans, if you read these ingredients, we don't even know what they are.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
I don't.
So you don't know what they are.
Yeah.
You're like, is that something preserved with formaldehyde or is that perfectly
Well, they don't even say
fine?
formaldehyde. They say
No, of course they don't say
something
it.
that has formaldehyde.
Yeah,
in it,
yeah,
right?
but I mean, they're disclosing that. But if you read it, you're right. It probably doesn't say preserved with formaldehyde.
Yeah, right.
You know, or the point of this is to make sure they don't have to, empty out the oil vats and they just keep reheating that rancid, like seriously, like we should not be eating this food. I mean, that really is the answer. I mean, unless you're completely okay with dealing with just the insidious long-term negatives it's going to have on your health. I don't really see another. That just seems like the answer to me. Anyways, what's the next one?
History of medical system.
Oh yeah, this is interesting. It's a little bit of a pivot, but I love this clip.
Our intervention-based system is by design. In the early 1900s, John D. Rockefeller, using that he could use byproducts from oil production to create pharmaceuticals, heavily funded medical schools throughout the United States to teach a curriculum based on the intervention-first model of Dr. William Stewart Halsted, the founding physician of Johns Hopkins, who created the residency-based model that viewed invasive surgical procedures and medication as the highest echelon of medicine. An employee of Rockefeller's was tasked to create the Flexner Report, which outlined a vision for medical education that prioritized interventions and stigmatized nutritional and holistic remedies. Congress affirmed the Flexner Report in 1910 to establish that any credentialed medical institution in the United States had to follow the Halsted-Rockefeller intervention-based model that silos disease, and to downplay viewing the body as an interconnected system. It later came out that Dr. Halsted's cocaine and morphine addiction fueled his day-long surgical residencies, and most of the medical logic underlying the Flexner Report was wrong, but that hasn't prevented the report and the Halsted-Rockefeller engine-based brand of medicine from being the foundational document that Congress uses to regulate medical education today.
That's really interesting. I've heard other people talk about that too.
Well, notice the date on that, 1910.
Yeah.
So the government is getting involved in our medical education all the way, before that.
Yeah.
But at least by 1910, they're starting to regulate or starting to push some sort of agenda from reports that leftists are funding and pushing it on our medical programs and saying you have to follow the guidelines of this report and how you educate your doctors.
Yeah, I mean, 1910, like 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, if you listen to that, it really makes a lot of things make sense, all the way down to the way most doctors, as we know them, think. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, he said, what did he say? What word did he use? Rather than looking at the body as a whole and thinking in terms of prevention.
Right.
I can't even remember the word that he used, but basically it's like procedure or medicate or do a surgery. Like that's the first thing that you do. And I mean, that's true. You go to most doctors these days and they're just like, well, here's a pill for that. Or here's a pill for that.
And you go to a specialist. Yeah, we need to do surgery on that.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, some of it's money. I get that, and incentive, and all, and insurance incentives, and all those things. But a lot of it is just that's what they're taught, like from day one of medical school. And that's really disappointing. He said a bunch of Callie when he was talking. This was just one clip, but he said a bunch of really interesting facts that I actually wrote down. He said in the past 2 years there have been 50,000 nutrition studies. And that nutrition research is just processed food marketing documentation. And it's a total joke, which is really, really frustrating to hear because you want to be able to point to these studies, but he's like, so many of them are just completely bought off and they're told what those scientists are told. This is what I want you to find, but it makes sense. That's how you get the food compass telling us that Cheerios are better for you than steak or eggs. I mean, that's literally, that came out as an official. I mean, it's just crazy. And it's crazy all the way down to the fact, you guys, it's just like, it goes against common sense. And I feel like we've really lost common sense. We become so paralyzed and so complacent and so like, just, all we do is appeal to authority. The doctor said this, the government says this, the food guide pyramid says this, and we've just blindly followed it. But it's just like, why? Like, why in the world, why do we all grow up eating cereal for breakfast? It's because that food guide pyramid came out and our moms all saw it, depending on everybody's age. And they were like, well, we all need to be eating these refined grains and whatevers. And then they're also full of sugar and food dye and all these other things. So they taste good and kids like them. That's why we eat cereal for breakfast. There's no other good reason. It makes you feel terrible. There's no nutritive value. You're hungry again in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Like there's no other reason besides the food guide pyramid told us to do it.
Yeah.
And that how stupid are we? Like how gullible are we? Like you just put a little heart on that box and it's like, well,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, truly, that's why we eat it. No one for the history of ever ate cereal for breakfast before that point. Like no one would do that. You would eat eggs like a normal person, because they're way better for you. But I mean, it's just amazing that food guide pyramid, which he literally has called in the past, just propaganda.
Yeah, propaganda.
That's
pyramid.
what it was.
Yeah.
All the big cereal companies were like, we would like the base for this much money. We would like the base of the pyramid to be our products.
Right. So I think we've talked a lot about just how would you unwind this disaster of big food and government and big pharma.
Mm-hmm.
It is embedded. It's all entangled. And it really needs to be backed out. I mean, this goes back to God gave the government the authority to rule over justice and to execute with a sword. And so that's the limited government definition of the government's job. God gave the family. Me and my wife's job is, I like using this term, that we're the ministers of health, education, and welfare.
Yeah.
Sounds like a government bureaucracy, but it's our job to take care of the health of the kids. It's our job to take care of the education of our kids, disciple and nurture and fear and admission of the Lord. And then it's the church's job to preach the gospel, disciple the nations, and administer the sacraments. That's the church's job. So it's the family's job to deal with food and healthcare and all that stuff. But when you hear the terminology, health, education, and welfare, you don't hear that as a family responsibility. You hear that as, the government does that. In fact, the government has a bureau or an agency that takes care of that.
Well, and I think, yes. And I think that we don't realize that we are kind of agreeing with that sentiment when we just go along with whatever we were taught in high school nutrition class or college or whatever our mom might have thought was, learned from the doctor's office with the food guide pyramid on that. Like I don't think we realize how much we are just assuming and defaulting to, the government knows best.
Yep.
The FDA knows best. If they're, whoever they are, if they say we just need to be eating this way, you need to avoid fat, you need to eat processed grains, you need to do this, you need to do that, wear a mask, get the vaccine, whatever.
Yep.
So many of us have just sort of gone along with it. And you're right. It's like, we need to be questioning this. And there's also been just this big thing, like, you don't know. These guys are doctors. They have the special knowledge. They have the education. But where are all these people educated?
Yeah.
Who's
government schools?
Who's got their fingers in all of this? It's all coming from the same place, and they're all taught the same thing. And unless you've found yourself a doctor who has really been able to self-educate and learn how to think for themselves and question things, they're all going to tell you the exact same thing. And I deal with this every day when I do nutrition counseling with women, when they parrot back to me what their doctors told them.
Yeah.
Eat more oatmeal, eat more cereal, run more, eat less. It's the same exact thing every time. And it's the most false, not helpful advice ever. And this is coming straight from, the medical professionals of our day, so I understand it's a very human tendency to want to trust your doctor or the Surgeon General or the FDA or the CDC. Like it's totally normal. But what we all were really red pilled in over COVID, and I think COVID was, it was terrible, but one of the great things that came out of it is that so many people were red pilled in terms of just like, I don't trust any of these people. Like they do not know what they're talking about. They are not being honest. They do not have our actual health in mind. So a lot of people got a lot more skeptical. We need to be skeptical about more than just COVID.
Yeah.
Just because there's a heart on something, or just because something says high fiber, or, all these trigger healthy words that we've learned since a young age to associate with this is good food. Clearly, you guys, it's not working. Look at the health of America, and then look at your own health. Look at the health of your family. Compare how you guys are doing compared to the generation before, the generation before. A lot of us are in a really bad place.
Yeah.
And like we say all the time on the show, it is the definition of insanity to continue doing the same thing and expect a different result. So, I don't know. We all just need to wake up.
I think the basic principle that you should walk away with, and how to kind of sort through a lot of this, is if someone is telling you something, or if someone's regulating something, or if someone's putting a law down on something, if it's not their job, if it's not the job that God has given them, then don't trust them, because God has not given them.
Yeah, that's probably a good
the
rule.
basic authority of that scenario. God has not given that to them.
Yeah.
So if they're trying to get involved in it, don't trust them. So if the government's trying to get involved in education, don't trust their curriculum, don't trust their, propaganda, don't try, so if the government's trying to get involved in food, don't trust their regulations. God hasn't given them that authority. And so now that I think things are so tangled, and so I think the reasonable question to ask is, okay, well, what do we as parents, where do we even begin in all this? I mean, you guys are, I mean, the government regulations are so entangled in big food so entangled in big pharma, pharma is so entangled in the government, it's just one big circle problem. And so how do we think? Well, I think first of all, mom and dad, you just I think the first principle is, don't trust people who don't have authority over that situation. Don't trust their regulations, don't trust their information, don't trust their education if they don't have authority over it. Secondly, start trying to think and trying to find people that you do trust who can maybe give you some good advice and resources on, what's good food and what's not good food and that kind of thing. And then lastly, and I think this video is, I think, really helpful with this is, vote with your wallet. And Carter, go ahead and roll that clip.
You as consumers have a lot more power than you realize. Most of what we talked about today were top-down solutions of how we can work with government to help. But the fastest way to help is if consumers start boycotting with their wallet. If they had just a 5% drop, just 5 in sales, if you had all of you here, or hopefully there's some very, very, very large influencers listening or celebrities, if any one of those people came out and said, do not buy U.S. Kellogg cereal until they put in the same ingredients that they sell abroad, and that caused sales to decline by 5%, just 5 in 1 quarter, they would change this overnight.
Okay.
That's an interesting point.
I like the point, but again, you're trying to think, okay, things are so complicated. The government's so involved in everything practically.
Yeah.
Big food has apparently been doing this for 60 years,
Long
70
time.
years, long time. Yeah. And so what can you do? Well, first, don't trust the people who should not have any say in your life regarding food. If they think they have an opinion, if they think they have a regulation for you, don't trust them. This is not their authority.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, find someone to trust. Third, use your wallet. Go buy food that matters. Go buy, I love your terminology, nutritionally dense food.
Real nutrient dense food. I mean, it really will solve at least at a personal level, it will solve this entire issue. Like, is processed food, what's in it? I don't know. Just don't eat it.
And so, and then I would say that, it's the wallet thing, but also say get involved politically in your state. Now, while I don't believe states are savior, I believe Christ is our savior. But politics needs to be stewarded well. For example, we actually every year we buy half a cow from some people we love doing business with, and it's great meat and all that stuff. We know we know their process, we know where they're getting their cow, we know how they're feeding them, and we know who's butchering it.
Mm-hmm.
So we know the whole process. But do you need a little charge for your phone there?
Oh, yeah,
I'm not quite sure if that's the right fit for you.
It's that time of day. It's not.
Right
it's not. Okay. It's okay.
But so we know our meat, but the problem is this guy who has this cow farm. Well, he is regulated by our state and federal government to where he can't butcher his own meat. He has to send it to a butcher.
Yeah, there's so many
and there's
rules.
So many stupid, and this is all big cow regulation.
Yeah.
Big butcher regulation. There's 4 major butcher manufacturers in the U.S. 4. That's it. We got 300 million people here. There's 4, and it's all regulated. Same thing with big dairy. It's all regulated, how they're allowed to produce their milk, all that stuff. So even our local cow guy is restricted on his ability to serve more in his market because he has to work or is restricted by the regulations of that. So in your state, it'd be, Thomas Massey's working really hard federally on this. In your state, try to figure out regulations that would or to deregulate and free up micro farms and the ability for neighbors to raise cows for each other and butcher them for each other, the ability to sell over the countertop and stuff like that.
Go as local as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. Cause deregulating it would make it more doable. Yeah. And then I don't know, pushing for, I am very hesitant to want more regulations, but I think that we could stop subsidizing, this hyper super processed food that is so bad for our health. I mean, I think that's pretty stupid, and it's an amazing amount of money that our government dumps into subsidizing these types of foods or even the crops that are used to create them.
Right.
There's that too. So do you want to do that last clip?
Yeah. One more thing to say before we go to that
sure.
last clip. I'll just say that oftentimes, again, this goes back to the principle: if they don't have authority over it and they're trying to institute authority over it, if God has not given the government authority over it and it's trying to institute authority over, in this case, food, then don't trust them. Okay, don't believe them. Figure out how to unregulate them. Get rid of that. And I forgot my point. Because what happens is if we think the government's the solution here, well, it's only going to make things worse. Like
it always does.
They made it this bad.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, they can undo it. They can figure out how to make it better by another regulation or by another law or by, it's like, it's only going to make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at our current system now, it's a complementary system of driving us into worse health conditions, a worse financial condition, and all the solutions are going to continue down that path. So the government, basically Obamacare tried to require you to pay for health insurance. Well, that's all happening because they think that's the solution to all our bad health, right? Oh, Americans are getting unhealthier. They need insurance to help pay for the unhealthierness.
To buy more drugs.
So we're going to force everyone to have healthcare insurance, so they pay for it.
Yeah,
and, it's just cascading into worse and worse situations.
Always make it worse.
So I think this clip kind of will help speak to some of this.
I hate when food is talked about as this lifestyle bucket or this prevention bucket. Food clinically and exercise and these basic metabolic habits are clinically the most effective reversal, the effective treatments for the chronic conditions that are plaguing our industry. We need to stop talking about these fringe food as medicine bills. We need to stop talking about these fringe prevention programs. It needs to be the center of healthcare, regenerative farming, transforming our food system, exercise. That is healthcare.
I love that. That I think actually is the most important clip or message that we have looked at today. And I completely 100% agree with him. And I have witnessed it for years for this to be true, that truly nutrition and exercise are healthcare. Like they are. They are by far the most impactful treatment or strategy that you can implement to prevent and or treat chronic disease, way more so than any, drug that you may end up getting put on by your doctor. And that's how seriously we need to be taking this, that's why we have the show about nutrition and exercise, because it is just that impactful to our health. Yes, in the short term, even more so in the long term. And I just wish everybody would take it as seriously as it needs to be taken, I have a couple other thoughts on that. If you're fine, just takeaway wise. So I think another thing that we need to, if you are a doctor, if you are a nurse, if you're a PA, whatever, and you have been trained in our just Western medical system, you really do need to recognize that you were taught pharmacology. You were not taught nutrition and exercise, which again should be at the center of healthcare, in my opinion. You were taught medication, not prevention. And it's not your fault. That's just been the way the system's been rigged since, like we heard, what did he say, 1910? I mean, it's just the way it's been this whole time. I mean, don't even get me started on what needs to change from, the educational standpoint. But, if that's you, and also know anything you might have been taught. I mean, the stats about what doctors in med school learn about nutrition is like 0 to maybe 1 class. But lots of med schools don't teach any nutrition, you guys, which is absolutely insane. But please note that if you're, in healthcare and you were taught something about nutrition, it's probably all wrong. So, and I hate that I say this, and this is where I'm at right now, but honestly, if that's you either need to drastically unlearn some of that stuff and or self-educate, or you need to refer out and stop giving terrible lifestyle and nutrition advice to your patients, because those are the people that come see me all the time, and it's catastrophic. Like it really is. I would also say, just to all of our listeners, be willing to pay out of pocket and or to travel to get to a good doctor, a good hormone specialist, good nutrition consultation, a personal trainer who knows what they're doing, whatever it is. Be willing to travel, be willing to pay, be willing to invest. And for the most part, I would say don't take nutritional advice from your doctor. I know there's exceptions out there, but for the most part,
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Mhm.
Okay. For all the reasons that we've just been talking about. I would also say, and this is huge, and this is something that us as Americans have not been encouraged to do and are not programmed to do, and this is not what doctors encourage us to do, but you really should make lifestyle changes before you put yourself or start taking some sort of
statin or
some sort of
or surgery or whatever.
pharmacology.
Yeah.
I mean, you really should. And I want to believe that most people don't want to be on 5 different medications that they're going to have to stay on for their whole life, that are expensive, that have, the horrifying side effects that they do disclose. And then who knows how many other side effects that they don't disclose. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you don't know. And they're like, oh, thoughts of suicide, constant nausea. I mean, like really bad stuff,
Yeah.
I want to believe most people don't want that. And I just wish I could get it across to you guys how preventable so many of these chronic diseases that you might be prescribed some of these, heavy duty drugs for are. They are so preventable, especially if you start early. If you don't wait until your health gets so bad that your blood pressure is through the roof, your insulin is through the roof, like your triglycerides are through the roof, then it gets harder. And I don't think it's never a lost cause, but if we could start thinking more root cause, if we could start thinking more preventatively and understand that lifestyle, exercise, nutrition, they actually can prevent these things. And they are also in the big scheme of things so much cheaper to do that than it is to go the pharmacology, physical therapy, surgery, super high insurance premium route, which so many of us are going. We're somewhere on that continuum, and then
all our decisions are like, okay, should I get healthcare? Should I go to my doctor? Should I should I be involved? Basically it's kind of this group think, be a part of the medical industrial complex decision
without even like realizing it, because
yeah.
we're all just used to what we're used to. But didn't we learn that over COVID? Like how fast do people forget? Like we all just live like you just eat crap in the morning, you eat fast food several times a week, you're sedentary, health declines. I don't feel that good. I don't exercise. I'm overweight. My husband's overweight. Kids are getting overweight. And everybody is just like boiling slowly in that soup. And it's like, well, that's normal. That's the way it's always been. It's what everybody else does. My doctor and then the doctor's expectations have kind of slowly come down too. So they're just like, oh no, I mean, you're fine. I can't believe you guys, the terrible blood work that people bring to me, terrible. Okay. When their doctor was like, oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine. I'm like, you're pre-diabetic. And did your doctor mention anything about that? And they're like, no, not really.
Wow.
And if they mention anything, they're just like, well, just try to eat oatmeal.
Yeah.
It's just insane. It's insane to me. So all of this is normal. That mindset is just being reinforced by the government, by our education systems, by doctors, by nurses, like everybody. But it's like, this isn't normal. It is not normal for, how unhealthy we all are, how terrible we feel, that we just constantly gain weight as we get older, and everybody is just like, well, it's just part of getting older. It doesn't have to be. Like, you guys understand that. It does not have to be, and it shouldn't be. And you would be a happier, more productive Christian husband, wife, person, parent if you weren't just like so accepting of that.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, and then just lastly, I like what you said, Gabe, where you were just like, don't listen to people, organizations, or anything if they are trying to dip their toes into a realm that is not theirs.
None of their business.
It's just not. And and also the proof is in the pudding. Nothing good has come from the government being involved in our food, in our medical,
in our
education. Just
system.
nothing good has happened. So it's like, why would that, just follow the logic there.
I would love, just thinking big picture here, it'd be great to have like a Christian organization come up with its own health standards, like its own pyramid or its own food recommendations. Its own, it's like, I understand things are so complicated. It's nice to have an organization that you trust.
Yes.
That would be like, okay, this is from their research, from their thought process. This is good. I'm going to follow that.
I would love that.
And maybe that's something that we work on over time.
Yeah. And I bet there's people kind of working on that already because post-COVID in particular has just been such a problem. And we're starting to see things like this roundtable pop up, which I think is exciting. I mean, like we were talking through the minutia of it, and we have our concerns or disagreements, but still, like, the message that a lot of these people are saying is true.
Shine some light on it.
They're like, what is going on? Like, there's so much corruption. There's so and our health is, as a nation, it is so stinking bad. Like, it's almost unbelievable to the point that now they're talking about weight loss injections for 6-year-olds. I mean, that's how bad it is, you guys. Did you hear me say that? Weight loss, weekly Ozempic, basically, injections for 6-year-olds, because that's how bad our health is. And that's how they would so much rather just make money off of these sick, fat kids that they're also, you know, they're partnered up with the food companies that are getting them sick and fat. And they would rather just make more money off of them by being like, well, here's a weight loss drug, rather than just be like, hey, you know what? If you just exercise and didn't eat this food, that would take away all your problems. You know, and then the government comes in and subsidizes all the worst food for you so that if you're, you know, poor, that's mostly all you can afford.
Right.
I mean, meat, eggs, these things are expensive, relatively speaking, you know? So, I mean, the whole thing is just, it's ridiculous is what it is. It's ridiculous. But all of this can be really overwhelming. All of it can leave you kind of paralyzed. You're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Are we just going to but what you know, you have a lot of agency over your own life. If you guys are parents, you are responsible the most, and you should be the most concerned and the most worried about the health of your own family. And then beyond that, the community that God's put you in. And there's a lot that we can do there. And a lot of these problems will go away if you just minimize the amount of ultra processed food that you buy and you eat. So luckily for us, and that at the same time is voting with our dollars, which is kind of what that guy talked about. And I think that's what we should be doing, you know? So don't be discouraged. There's a lot of things you can do, but for some of you listening, if you're doing that, eating mostly real whole nutrient dense food is going to be a huge shift from what you grew up with, what you're used to, what your habits are, maybe even what your parents did. You know what I mean? Like that can be for some people a huge shift, but it's got to happen. And it's going to be, like we've said, the most by far impactful thing that you can do for your health.
Yeah. And I mean, and I know, like, if you actually are kind of sorting through, well, where do I begin? Where do I start? You know, Annie does do health consultations on this.
Yeah, I do.
You know,
I did 2 today.
Food and health consultations and everything. So I can give you a nice personalized kickstart.
Absolutely. But, there's a lot to talk about.
This show's making me think about more resources we could work on for some of this stuff and everything. So anything else, baby?
It's a huge can of worms. I don't think so, guys. Thanks for slumming through that. Those horrifying stats with us. Good things to know.
Thank you guys for joining Water Break. Make sure you take action to see us in Fort Worth at prodigalamerica.com. Join our email list, RenchMedia@gmail.com. Feel free to ask us questions there. We can't get to them all, but a lot of them we can bring up on the show too. And then lastly, follow Annie on Instagram, me on Twitter, and Annie's website is AnnieWrench.com. So thank you. We'll be back next week. We hope to have some guests coming on the show. So excited to add some more layers to what we're doing.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
America is a country that was founded for the purpose of allowing Christians to do their duty before God and not to have their consciences ruled by the doctrines and commandments of men. Reese Fund exists in order to see the 10 Commandments properly applied, not just as a plaque on the wall, but to actually be used in business as though they're commandments from God that we're supposed to obey. Our goal is to find businesses and to buy them and to build them up. We want to find manufacturing businesses and use them to make sure that we can maintain our capacity to do things here. Reese Fund, Christian capital, boldly deployed.